I remember sitting with my mom and sister and my dad at the kitchen table, and we knew he was a Marine, but he didn't want to talk about it all that much. He would share snippets of it, but he didn't go into great detail.
I'm here now with Tracy Layton. All right, and you're originally from Chicago.
Correct.
All right, and why are you here on Saipan?
I wanted to come and visit Saipan in Tinian, which was where my dad fought in World War II. He was in the 2nd Marines, and I just wanted to see where he was.
Okay.
This was a great opportunity for me to come, and I wanted to see it.
And what was his name?
Joe Goggin.
Okay, and we determined that he was in the 2nd Marine.
Correct.
And he landed more than likely on Red Beach.
We believe so.
Right, based on the information that we've gathered.
Right.
And one of the questions that always comes up to me is, when you were growing up, were you aware of your father's role in history? Or did he talk about it? How did you discover, what he did? And
I remember sitting with my mom and sister and my dad at the kitchen table, and we knew he was a Marine, but he didn't want to talk about it all that much. He would share snippets of it, but he didn't go into great detail. And that was I was born in 1960. So in the 60s, he really didn't want to share too much about his time in the military. He would share, like I said, little bits and pieces of it. One thing I do remember him sharing was he told the family what he would say in Japanese. He was taught how to say "come out of the caves" in Japanese.
Okay.
He was very proud of his service. He was very dedicated to the safety of Americans, and he was proud of his service, but he didn't really want to go into too much detail with my sister, my mom, and I when we were kids.
Now, you also said that he actually did several tours beyond Saipan, or before and after Saipan.
That's correct. Yeah, his first landing was in Tarawa.
Okay.
And then he came to Saipan, and then Tinian, and then he later went on to Okinawa.
Okay.
And he was hit in Okinawa right at the very end of the battle. He always said, "Oh, luck of the Irish," it was just at the very end, and he was seriously wounded in Okinawa.
And then he was sent back home.
He was sent back to San Francisco. One thing that I always found kind of interesting is that he was never a smoker.
Okay.
And when he got his rations, I believe cigarettes were part of the rations, and he always traded his cigarettes for chocolate.
Okay.
And but when he was wounded after Okinawa, he went back and he was in that military hospital near San Francisco. I believe it might have been Mare Island, though I'm not 100% sure on that. And out of sheer boredom, nurses would bring cigarettes, and out of boredom, he started smoking. So we always found it kind of funny that the nurses got him smoking. But he later quit out of sheer determination. He went cold turkey and quit smoking later on.
And that wasn't the only war he fought in.
Well, he actually was not. He was called up. He was discharged with disability after Okinawa. But he believes, and no way to really know this or not, but he believes he was on a list because his disability payment was bigger than he believes others. And so when Korea came, he was called back. And so he was sent to Camp Lejeune down in South Carolina. And though he never went to Korea, he was training guys that eventually went to South Korea. He found that somewhat boring because he had been in battle before. But that was the end of his military service at that point. He was born in 1926, and so he was pretty young when he came here. And so when he was fighting here on Saipan, he was only 18. And I believe that when guys enlisted after Pearl Harbor, you know, they were supposed to be 18 years old, but I think a lot of times the draft offices overlooked some of the age of the guys.
And you mentioned when he actually got the motivation to enlist, so that was right after Pearl Harbor?
That is correct.
He was 15 at the time.
Right. So he was born in April of 26.
Okay.
So after Pearl Harbor, he was 15. And he actually enlisted at 15 years old, which I think of myself as a 15-year-old, and I can't even imagine doing such a thing.
Right.
But you know, he was cut from a different cloth, as we talked about earlier. I don't know that I could have done that, but he did. And I also think he wasn't alone. He, in a sense, almost forced his parents to sign a waiver, and he went. And you know, he went to boot camp down in San Diego, I believe, and along with a lot of other guys. And he said, I went in a tough kid and I came out a man. And I think all the Marines went through that. And he started out in California, went to New Zealand, and then on to Tarawa. And I think from what I learned is that the guys that got on the ships of Marines where they were going, they never really knew until the last moment what their mission was.
So you knew a little bit about Saipan before you came here, based on what some of the things your father had told you, some of your own researches. Well, can you remember anything that he mentioned about Saipan that stuck out in his mind?
One thing I vividly remember, because this is something he vividly remembered, he talked about the sugar cane.
Okay.
And he said that the sugar cane was so difficult to maneuver through because it was so sharp. And he said it cut through his uniform, his dungarees, and he said it was so difficult on his skin, his face, and everything. He said it was so difficult. And then he said Mount Tapachau, did I say that correctly? Yes. He said it was, you know, almost 1,550 feet, but he goes, it might as well have been 15,000 feet. It just seemed, it was such a challenge to get up there. And he said it was so tough. It was such a difficult battle. But it just, that's what resonates with me. And I'll go back a little bit, and he didn't talk much about it when my sister and I were kids, but as we had our families, his grandkids, my kids and my sister's kids, were very interested. And as time passed, he became a little bit more open with sharing with his grandkids, and then he spoke more about it, but more time had passed. You know, so that was the early 2000s, you know, and you know, at that point, you know, 60 years had passed. And so he was a little bit, you know, and really he probably spoke more about it in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I think as time passed, it was okay. He never had any regrets about anything he did. It was his duty, it was his mission, and he was such a proud man to do what he did to help the U.S. do what they needed to do.
And now you finally have made a pilgrimage here to see where he was, where he landed, and we had a chance to do a 2-day tour. We actually saw the landing beaches on Saipan, and we saw the landing beach on Tinian as well. So you were able to see White Beach on Tinian, as well as Red Beach, Green Beach, Blue Beach, and Yellow Beach. So based on what you were expecting compared to what you actually found here on the island, what stands out?
I can't believe what he did.
Okay.
It's just the hardships. He was not a big guy.
Okay.
He was probably about 5'6", probably 135, 140 pounds. And I think of the pack he had to carry. He was a BAR, a Browning automatic rifle guy. It's a heavy weapon to carry and use. I don't, physically, I don't know how he was able to do it. I don't know how he had the strength and fortitude and the mental capacity to do it. You and I spoke about it. I don't know how he did it. I know when I came here, I thought, I can't have too much fun here because this was a place he did not have fun. Then I couldn't do it. I couldn't have too much fun here.
But you know, I didn't mention this here, but something that came to me about what you just said. As you said earlier, that every generation wants the next generation to have life a little bit easier. So he suffered through that hardship specifically so you wouldn't have to do that sort of thing. So it's a thought that crossed my mind that, yeah, I know you want to replicate his experience to see what he went through, but part of why he did what he did, I imagine, is so that his children and his daughter wouldn't have to.
Well, and I will say, he and my mom gave my sister and I, and then our kids, an amazingly wonderful life.
Right.
And for that, I'm grateful.
And as far as the island itself, what did you think of Saipan? Well, first of all, I'll lead the witness here. You had said that it wasn't what you expected, based on the fact that you associate this island with war and your father experience. So what you saw of modern day Saipan is not what you expected.
Very beautiful.
Right.
It's the beaches are beautiful. When I first came in, it's very rugged. It's the mountains, the terrain. It's still, it's hard for me to wrap my head around what the Marines and the Army did to conquer and take the island from the Japanese when it was so fortified, and they knew how critical it was to keep the island from the Americans. I don't know how they did it, but they did, and it absolutely amazed me. But as I see it today, it's amazing. I look at everything here, this beautiful hotel that I'm in, and as you drove me around the island, it's beautiful. The people are so friendly. Everyone asks me, and people will ask me, why are you here? And I'll tell them. And when I say I'm here because my dad was here, he was part of the 2nd Marines, they light up, we're so grateful, we're so grateful. And that makes me feel very proud.
Right.
And that just makes me kind of beam with pride for my dad.
Excellent.
I was fortunate enough to get to see the John Castro in the seafaring project, where he was working with local youth to show them basket making and canoe construction, which I think is wonderful because it's so important to carry on the traditions of the elders to pass on to the youngsters. So critical. And same with the preservation of local languages, because with the death of those, we don't want to see that. So thank you to John for letting me observe. It was wonderful.
We just came back from Tinian, so we saw the runways there as well. We saw the landing beach. So you got a good sense of places your father would likely have seen if he was here long enough. I wanted to make sure you saw all of the landing beaches, as well as some of the fortifications that still exist now on Tinian, because I've interviewed folks before who've had relatives who were here, and sometimes in the downtime the soldiers were able to at least explore some of the islands, see some of the beauty. So some of what we saw today, whether it was Forbidden Island or Forbidden Island or some of the beaches on Tinian, there's a good chance that if your dad was here for any length of time, that he might have had time to explore and appreciate the island beyond its more tragic and serious and solemn purposes. So, cool. Is there anything you'd like to add about to share with the Saipan people or anyone watching the YouTube video?
Well, I'm so grateful that I was able to come and see the island. And my initial visit here, I thought, would be more sobering, and it is in some respects. As I've watched and I've seen the spots I saw, but I thought I wanted to bring some things back for my family because I'm not sure if they'll ever be here.
Right.
But as I go into some of the stores, everything I see says, I love Saipan. And I didn't think I could purchase anything that says, I love Saipan, because I don't know if my dad loved I love Saipan. He didn't. He was at war here. But as he left here, what he did was so critical. He and the other Marines and all the members of the military, what they did was so critical to the success of the whole operation. It made me have a different viewpoint.
Absolutely. And he suffered so that there could be a period of time where people could love Saipan.
Yes.
He suffered specifically to make Saipan what it is today.
Right. And so I do have a different viewpoint. And that's important too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So thanks again.
Oh, and thank you, Walt, for just a wonderful tour. I learned so much, not only about the military operation, but about the beautiful islands and how they've progressed since the war years. Really important. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This tour was simply amazing, and that doesn't even do it justice. You know, I left home 18 days ago, and I'm at the end of my trip, and it was an amazing trip. But I kept saying, I can't wait to do this tour. But it simply exceeded expectations. Walt showed me so many different things that I never saw coming, and it just added so much to an already amazing trip. I absolutely loved learning all the different things, and he added so much to the tour and so much to my already what I thought was pretty good knowledge of what happened on Saipan and Tinian, and I felt like I learned a lot, and I cannot say enough about how great and how phenomenal this tour was. And I thank you, Walt, from the bottom of my heart.
You're quite welcome.
For sharing your just extensive and thorough knowledge of what happened here. And I so appreciate it, and I will never forget these 2 days. I will never forget it.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Subscribe.